there, I'm Meredith Noble, co-founder of the Global Grant Writing Collective. In today's video, we are going to be getting into the history of grants, looking at what does a grant writer do, how do you get into this field, what kind of education and training do you need to have a degree, all of your top questions if you've been kind of curious about what is this field of grant writing, we're going to get into it. So with that, let's hit it. Okay, so my mother is a historian, and I guess the apple doesn't fall far from the tree because I went a little nuclear on the history of grants for you. So first of all, when did grants even start? It actually goes back to the medieval times, when in ancient Rome, we would actually give grants for important art and cultural projects. In medieval Europe, the same thing happened. Church and religious orders also provided funds for artistic and cultural projects. Now, I'm gonna look at just sort of the US history for grants, but there is going to be linked below a resource that's amazing. It's the history of philanthropy all over the globe. It's so cool. Definitely go check it out. In the early 1800s, the US federal government started to cede basically land for public schools, but I'm saying this in quotations because y'all know that was stolen land from the sovereign nations that were here first. But that was sort of the original grant in the US anyway, was granting land to build schools. In 1862, that's what then led to the Morrill Act, and Congress gave land and money to establish colleges in every state. So, gotta give ourselves credit for valuing education. In 1887, the Hatch Act gave every state $15,000 a year to run an agricultural experiment station. And the reason I had to pull out this example is that this is one of the first times that the federal government actually required some sort of reporting. So you had to submit an annual financial report, and a couple years later, you could be federally audited for how you spent that money. Here in Alaska, those experiment stations were amazing and game-changing. So if you lived in some far-flung part of Alaska and you wanted, let's say, seeds to grow garlic that would work in that soil and that harsh of an environment, the agricultural experiment station would mail you seeds that you could grow. It was really cool. Honestly, it's a tragedy that those closed down. Then we start to go into having grants for fire protection, vocational schools, and then of course highways. We'll talk about them in a second. So after World War I, there was a few feeble attempts to start building sort of welfare style grant programs. So fighting STIs, vocational rehab, maternal and child health. But those really fell out of favor by the late 20s, which goes to show that the relationship between politics and grants has always existed, and so those were mostly dropped. Then we hit the Depression, and 80% of the grants at that time were focused on highways. So at this point, everyone has a car, or at least they want to have a car, not using a horse and buggy anymore. And the federal government realized if we let every state try to build roads, it's gonna be chaos. And every state didn't want to pay for it. Roads are really expensive. And if you had a small rural tax base, but urban drivers are using it. Honestly, there's a great book. I pulled it out here for you if you are actually nerdy on this topic like I am. Car Country, really great book to read all about it. Then at the end of the years of Depression, grant funding completely shifted and it was used for emergency employment. So if you've been to any cool state parks and you see those gorgeous log buildings made of stone or rock, often those were made by the Conservation Corps. That's an example of how a federal grant was used to employ people during the Depression. Then we roll into World War II. All resources go to the war, but afterwards we have a big spike in grants, emergency grants, just like we had with COVID, that were for educating and training defense workers. So now we have all these people coming back, they're trying to get employed, and that's what those grants were for. There were also grants for housing community veterans, but it was supposed to be super temporary, get you on your feet and you're out. That was a little bit messy. We still haven't solved that problem. Now rolling into the 60s, we have the Great Society, which I'm also linking an amazing resource by the History Channel about this. So this was an initiative started by President Lyndon Johnson, and it was ambitious to say the least. So it was to end poverty, reduce crime, abolish inequality, and improve the environment. Like, not a light agenda. So that ended up actually leading to a ton of the programs that we have today. Head Start, Medicare and Medicaid, the National Endowment for the Humanities. That's where a bunch of really cool art grants come from. But what ended up sort of sucking the life out of the Great Society initiative was, of course, the Vietnam War. And then, of course, Lyndon Johnson went down with that. But many of those programs endured because we still have them today. Now, if we just do another big hop, 20 years, now we're into cause marketing taking off. So this is when you have Coca-Cola and Citibank sponsoring a Hands Across America benefit event for fighting hunger and homelessness. this. This was really the beginning of cause-related marketing, in which corporation sponsors a philanthropic campaign in exchange for marketing. So now that's very normalized, but at the time that was very revolutionary, and that would have been 1986. So if we do another big leap in time, what stood out to me was the Giving Pledge. So Bill and Melinda Gates and Warren Buffett pledged to give away 99% of their personal fortune by the time their life is over. And this was part of a Giving Pledge campaign calling other wealthy individuals to do the same. Apparently, Mark Zuckerberg has signed this Giving Pledge campaign, which seems a little hard to believe, but apparently he has. So there you have it. But over 125 of those pledges have been signed by 2014, and I'm not sure where it stands today. So obviously, there's so much more to it, right? Go check out the resources that are down below. And then if you leap forward another 20 years, COVID hits, right? And we had another round of those emergency grants to help people react to this massive public pandemic. And now those are starting to wane, and we're back on sort of the consistent programs we've been running. The general thread that you should just sort of take away from this is that grants have just been this big experiment. And as time has gone on, there's been more and more reporting requirements, and they've gotten harder to earn. A federal grant can be 250 hours that you have to pour into winning that sucker. That takes a good month or two of someone's time, let alone all of the reporting once you win the sucker. Interesting history. I thought it was enjoyable, and you might like it as well. Okay, so let's move into the types of organizations that get grant funding. Now, you're obviously thinking nonprofits, right? For sure. But did you know grants extend beyond there? So we have public agencies like your local city government or local town. They can receive grants. The state government can receive grants from the federal government. You can actually fund your own creative work. Maybe you want to get a documentary funded and you write a grant to the local, like in our case here in Alaska, the Rasmussen Foundation would actually give individual artist awards. So that's really cool. You could even be a grant writer for a for-profit agency. Now, grants don't typically go to for-profit agencies, but that's how I cut my teeth on becoming a grant writer. I wrote grants in an engineering firm, and then we would get money for our clients, which could then pay us for building a wastewater treatment plant or whatever. Colleges and universities, and then quasi-public agencies like a port district. How are grants typically awarded? Here's the high-level overview. Typically, a grant has a deadline when you have to submit an application. The application tends to come with details on how the requirements to submit. Now, some, like I said, are an 80-page list of requirements. If you're going after a federal grant, I call those the Tonka-sized grants. Or maybe it's a smaller foundation grant and you only need to submit like a 3-page narrative, and that's all there is to it. So the breadth of complexity really depends on the size of the grant and the type of agency. But that's sort of the essence of it. We get that application in, you hurry up, and then you wait. You wait a couple months, up to 9 months to find out if it was successful, which is one of the hardest parts about being a grant writer, is like sitting on your hands and waiting. Okay, so if awarded, then that grant is gonna move into, you're gonna sign contracts and actually start implementing the grant. And if you are responsible for helping manage that grant, maybe you do. If you're like me and you never wanted to touch that stuff, then that would just go to someone else in the department. I guess the essence of that I wanna emphasize is that it's science, but it's not rocket science. It's following directions. If you can read a recipe, you can write a grant narrative. Really, it's totally doable. Which does lead me into the next question of skills for grant writing. The number one most important skill is project management. So we're not born as amazing project managers. It's actually a built skill. We develop the skill learning how to manage a project. Communication is critical, creativity, critical thinking. Did you get a liberal arts degree and someone said, what will you ever do with that? Like, hello, this is how you do it. And this is an example. I wrote a grant for Kodiak, the island of Kodiak. This is an Alaska example again, for a US EPA brownfield grant. And I needed to make an argument for why they deserve to get this funding because of all of this World War II contamination that happened on this island. So I'm trying to look at what's the water quality impact, the impact to the soil, how does that impact redevelopment? And I was having to look at all sorts of interesting scientific studies, like are there less otters that live here because the water quality has been impacted and it's downstream from this World War II site? And you're coming up with those critical thinking arguments yourself. They're not just out there for you to pluck and use, like often you're thinking of them yourself. So if you like working on projects and you like communicating with different people, and most importantly, you enjoy not working on the same thing every single day, but working on a project where you ramp it up and you do it and you crush it and then you execute it and you're done, then you would probably enjoy grant writing. Now, you might be thinking, yes, but do I have to go back to college for that? No, you do not have to go back to college for it, which is great news. And frankly, most of the college programs that are teaching grant writing, it is so old school and it'll make you think the last thing you want to do is write grants when actually it's very fun. Now, should you get some training? Yeah, you definitely do, because you don't want to spend 5 years learning everything the hard way, having to pick yourself back up when you make a really stupid mistake. And I should know because that was the route I took. There were not any grant writing courses or options when I was getting my career going besides this very old school option, the American Grant Writers Association, and I just could not get excited about learning from them. What you can do, I'll link up below. We actually have looked at all of the different programs that you can go and earn a certificate and how you can pursue building up your qualifications and your competence as a grant writer. You don't need to have a certificate. What I have found that really is at the root of building your confidence is getting some experience. So that is at the root of how we teach grant writing. I want you to earn to learn. So land a paid contract that can then allow you to learn, all right, how does this all work? And we'll give you the safe container for doing it so you're not winging it, you are well supported. We'll talk about that more later. So what are the career opportunities that are available to you? So there's sort of like 3 paths. Path 1 would be you are a grant writer in-house. You write for a nonprofit, right? You have a job to write grants for that organization, right? So that's one path. Another path could be maybe you want to start side hustling and seeing if you like grant writing. And if you do, then maybe you scale that into path 3, which is a full-time consulting business. You quit your job and you're freelancing. You can do remote work. You have a highly flexible schedule, etc. So there's a lot of different ways to do it. Or maybe it's just this like small additional skill set you use to fund some of your own creative work, etc. Like there's a lot of different ways you can use it. But the main 2 ways I like to think about it are, do we want to start freelancing or do we want to land a new job? And you don't have to know that right now. So what's the earning potential? There is a survey put out by the GDS every year on how much our consultants and in-house grant writers make. So you can go look at that pricing survey. The Grant Easy Management Software, GEMS for short, actually sponsors it. So we really enjoyed looking at that. And what we learned is owners of consulting firms are an average take-home salary of $100K, which is great. It's probably more than what you might be making in your in-house job. Plus, there's a lot of other really nice party tricks when you own your own business, like you can give up to 25% of your salary as a retirement benefit. So now all of a sudden, let's say you made $100K, you can put 25K into retirement as a business expense, which is really amazing. I've got grant writers that are being paid up to $150K in-house as a grant writer, but I want you to be at minimum making $75K because y'all, inflation, like $1 is not worth what it was a couple years ago. So we got to make sure we're making enough to like really feel like we're moving towards our goals and you're not just grinding from one paycheck to the next. The biggest thing I want to highlight the importance on is the ongoing learning and development in this field. It's not something you master, you're done, you've seen it all. Every grant application brings you something new to dig into, and just recognize that you're going to become dangerously knowledgeable about a lot of different topics, which makes you the most interesting person at a dinner table. Let's look at 3 case studies real quick so you can see what all is possible. Jessica, one of my favorite stories. Jess was a teacher during COVID. She had to quit because she could not teach and take care of her boys at home, but she also still needed to make some money. So she deployed the organic networking framework. I'm going to link that up as the next video, where basically you go create opportunities for yourself. It's totally cool. She has done $55,000 in her first year, and frankly, she's way surpassed what I need to update my slides. $100K in year 2, which means she's actually earned this sweatshirt. We give everybody a sweatshirt when they have made $100K in revenue. She has served as book club leader, serves as a coach now. I mean, we really love all things that Jess has done, and she's won over 1.3 million in grants. So here are a couple screenshots. You're welcome to take some time just to even pause me so you can read them. But winning grants for emergency food shelters, submitting her first federal grant, and working with other grant writers so you don't have to do this work alone. I love the takeaway here from Jess. Don't let your own story get in your way. If this little elementary school teacher from Hawaii can do it, you can too. Okay, so maybe you don't want to go the freelance route. You want to be either land a new job or get promoted within the organization you're already at. So Suzanne is a great example of that. She actually landed a job at a YMCA, but realized she only had a couple months of experience and was way over her head. So she came, got trained, got certified, and she's won $300K in grants in the first 8 months on her job, which is not bad. And I'm sure she had a bunch more pending award. Third example is Jackie. Jackie's the most humble athlete ever. This chick was an Olympic alternate athlete for Juno, like really impressive chick. However, she was very burned out. She was working at a gym gym, no schedule flexibility, and she realized, wait a minute, I've been working with nonprofits, I just haven't done grant writing. So she ended up deciding, okay, I'm gonna start freelance grant writing. She has 5 clients now. She's able to quit the gym, work from home, travel, and have so much more schedule flexibility, which is something we want everyone to have. All right, that was a big old video, but I hope you found that helpful for understanding sort of the lay of the land and the history of grants. Your next marching orders are watch the organic networking framework video. It's about to pop up. That's how you land paid gigs when you have no prior experience, so you can get into this field if you're interested in it, or go down into the description and you'll see a training that we have built for you that I think you'll really enjoy. Hit the like and subscribe button if you've enjoyed this video, and add a comment and let me know what else you'd like to learn.